Hello, bonsoir, and welcome to the Get French Football News Show. I'm Nathan Staples, and joining me this evening are Rich Allen and Jeremy Smith. The Ides of March are passing and onwards into the quote-unquote business end of the season, but who is fighting to keep their heads above the waterline and who is being pulled in by the current? The Ligue 1 weekend and a look at the Le Bleu squad ahead of their qualifiers after the latest headlines. Nice let victory slip through their fingers in the first game of the weekend as Willian Cyprien's opener was cancelled out by a Firmin Mubele late goal for Toulouse as they earned a 1-1 draw at the Allianz Riviera. Elsewhere on Friday night, Monaco caused somewhat of an upset given table position at least as they held off home side Lille before Vinicius hit the killing blow in the final minutes to give the Principality club a vital 1-0 win. In the multiplex on Saturday, Guingamp gained a huge 3 points in the battle to avoid the drop as Ludwig Blah's penalty saw them beat fellow strugglers Dijon by a 2-0, which means Caen now slipped to the bottom of the table as they were hammered 5-0 at home against Saint-Etienne. Angers and Amiens played out a scoreless draw for the second time this season, with Christian Lopez missing a penalty late on for the hosts, while Strasbourg let a 2-0 lead slip at Nîmes, who scored twice to leave the Alsace side without a win in the league since the end of January. On Sunday, Lyon responded to their Champions League elimination at the hands of Barcelona with a 3-2 win over Montpellier. Martin Terre, Moussa Dembele and Houssam Aouar all on the score sheet, while Nabil Fekir missed a chance to increase that victory margin from the spot. Reims continued their outstanding run recently with Remy Udan's wonder strike beating Nantes as Paulo Sousa was denied his first win in charge of Bordeaux as Rennes struck late to get a 1-1 draw. The final match of the weekend saw Le Classique go the way of Paris Saint-Germain as the Di Maria show helped them earn a 3-1 win. His double and Kylian Mbappe's opener cancelled out a consolation from Valais-Germain, with Mbappe missing a penalty in the second half, as well as Marseille seeing Steve Mandanda sent off. In international news, Anthony Martial has pulled out of the France squad for these upcoming qualifiers against Moldova and Iceland this week and the start of next week through injury, and has been replaced by Atletico Madrid winger Thomas Lemar. And that's all for now. But to keep up to date with all the news in the world of French football, head on over to our website at www.getfootballnewsfrance.com and follow us on Twitter at GFFN. We start this week with Le Classique. Where else really can we go? And it certainly had its talking points, despite maybe not being quite the competitive event, at least anyway we thought it might be. Rich, it was an intriguing game, especially given that obviously there was a disallowed goal in the first half. There was a very strange mistake from Mandanda that almost caused the goal. But as soon as the second half started, when they got that equaliser, we thought we may have had a game on our hands. But in the end, it was more of a redemption story for PSG and another 3 points that takes them closer and closer to the title.
Yeah, I mean, you felt coming into this, Marseille stood something of a chance. You know, they were in good form. They had Balotelli playing really well since he joined. Obviously, there were I think probably mind games leading up to kickoff about whether he was going to be fit all week. It was no, he's not going to make it, and then an hour before kickoff, his shirt was pictured in the dressing room, and of course he was then in the starting lineup. And what I quite liked about this was it at least restored some of the fieriness. It was quite a bad-tempered game, but yeah, you felt Marseille were a little bit subdued. I think they controlled the game pretty well, I think, in the opening 45 minutes. I mean, PSG had the better chances. They had the ball in the net once, ruled out for offside, and then in sort of classic Marseille tradition, despite playing pretty well, they go and concede right at the death of the first half. But all credit to Rudy Garcia, all credit to the squad that they came out and got that goal. I think it was only about 20 seconds after kickoff. and you felt, well, actually, you know what? They've got PSG a little bit rattled here. Sadly, of course, that was not meant to be. Mandanda, who didn't have a good game, regardless of the red card, he wasn't having a particularly good game. There was an incident in the first half where he nearly conceded a pretty embarrassing own goal, sort of a la sort of Stéphane Ruffier. I think that was at the Parc des Princes as well. I think a few seasons ago, where he sort of tried to play a back pass away from goal, but nearly passed it into his own net. The Di Maria goal really, I think, sort of blew the chances for Marseille to take something from this game. It was a goal that it was a good finish, but Mandanda should be saving that. A goalkeeper of his supposed caliber should be saving that. And then the red card, crazy stuff from Mandanda. No idea why he was rushing out. The replay showed it was offside. So it could have resulted in a goal, but it would have been disallowed. I genuinely no idea what he was doing, herring out of his area like that. He was sent off, and of course, Di Maria sort of increased the punishment with that terrific free kick. It was a deserved PSG win. I don't think PSG were absolutely outstanding. I think they were helped a little bit by Marseille, sort of freezing slightly on the big occasion once again. But there was. I think the game will probably be remembered more for what happened in the stands and maybe a couple of incidences on the pitch away from the goalmouth action than anything else. I'm sure we'll come on to what was going on in the stands in terms of some of the banners and some of the behaviour with some of the players on the pitch. But it was certainly from a neutral's perspective, it was a very entertaining Classique, and it did sort of hark us back to the good old days of how these tussles usually ended up.
Yeah, and it was an interesting affair. We'll come on to sort of maybe talking about the goalkeeping really experience in a little while, but particularly from PSG's point of view, Jez, Di Maria grabbing two, and he may be a little bit upset he couldn't grab a third with Mbappe taking the penalty in the end, but another excellent display from the Argentine, and there should really be an argument that he's been PSG's best player over the course of the season.
He's definitely up there. I'd say it's only the only two contenders are him and Mbappe. Neymar maybe has been slightly unlucky in that he was beginning to show some really good form when he got injured. But yeah, Di Maria's been right up there. And there was an article in L'Equipe this week about debating whether Di Maria is better when Neymar's not there. I think the stats probably bear it out, and whether Neymar's there or not, he's absolutely one of the two or three best players there, and I think probably, if anything, a little underrated. I don't know if it's because he isn't quite as stellar a name, if it's because he came off the back of the disappointing time that he had at Man United, but unlike quite a few others, and okay, some people point to the second Man United match, but no one came out of that well. Di Maria generally has stepped up when he's needed to, and he really was the difference on Sunday night. And as Rich said, it wasn't the greatest performance from PSG, and a lot of Marseille fans are a little upset that they felt that if ever PSG were there for the taking, this was the time. And although they did get back to 1-1 for a little while, I think most people felt that PSG pretty much controlled the game and were able to step it up and still not even come close to sort of fourth or fifth gear. But I think a lot of that is down to Di Maria. He seemed, for that match anyway, to be playing another level to everyone else, including even Mbappe. And as you said, it's pretty harsh of Mbappe not to let him sort of cap it with a hat trick in the last minute or the last kick of the game, actually, with the match already won. I think coming away with the match ball would have been the least that Di Maria deserved for that performance.
Absolutely. I am going to be. I kind of like being in this position, to be fair, of being party pooper, but I'll do it again because Di Maria does score an excellent free kick, I think, for the second. But at the same time, I don't know why goalkeepers do this from free kicks from especially that kind of distance. Stand in the middle of your goal. I mean, it's you're going to see it come plenty of time. It's not going to drive past you if you stood in the middle of the goal. It's for you to get to one of those corners, and Pele can only not reach it because he's too far over to the right hand side for some inexplicable reason. It gives Di Maria that chance. Yes, it goes off the post, but at the same time, a keeper has to do a little bit better there, really, as well.
I saw a Marseille fan tweet the gif of the guy sort of tapping the side of his head and saying, Pele was really clever there. He saw Mandanda make mistakes using his hands, so he decided not to bother.
It's a perfect analogy for both of them, I think, in that game. We'll come on to Stephen in a moment. But in terms of Marseille, at least anyway, general performance, right? Jez hit on it a little bit there, Rich, that they were a little bit lethargic, maybe could have offered a little bit more. But have we been sort of fooled by the latest results really for them? I mean, they weren't really barnstorming results against Nice, against Rennes, against some other smaller sides where they got the wins that they wanted but didn't really come out the blocks. Have they really recovered from what had been an awful sort of November, December, January time? Were we sort of mystified by results, and this more of a statement of exactly where they are at the moment?
I don't know if that's the case. I think this really is typical Marseille. We know that once they can get a bit of momentum, they can get results against the quote-unquote lesser teams. We know they have always had an issue when it's come to the big games. And then, as I said before, just feeling like they've almost frozen on that big occasion. I mean, they've been aided, I think, by a lack of consistency from other teams around them. So Marseille have gone on this run where they've been able to pick up points quite regularly from their sort of last sort of half dozen or so games. That's taken advantage of the fact that, Lille have dropped form, I think, a little bit. I think Lyon are still a little too on the inconsistent side. Strasbourg have fallen away after a good start to the season. So they have been heavily aided by that. Maybe Balotelli's form has masked something. He has brought a little bit of joy back for the Marseille fans, and he has so far proven to be, I think, a good signing. He's by no means the complete answer to their issues, but it's a step in the right direction. That seems to have resulted in Garcia finally deciding to play two up front, and lo and behold, Germain looks a little bit more effective. So to an extent, yes, they have improved. They've got a goal scorer who's scoring for starters, so that's a step in the right direction. They've got a defense that looks, semi-decent now, semi-competent. I think Kaletakar and Kamara, they're still a little rusty, but I think that's to be expected for a player new to the league and a player as young and as inexperienced as Kamara is. But there's certainly signs there that they're starting to form a promising partnership. I think Morgan Sanson, he's a player who I felt so frustrated with because there's a great player there, but in almost Marseille-esque style, he's so inconsistent. But again, he's maybe starting to find a tiny bit of consistency again. Another, still a player that's got a long way to go. So there's signs there, and what we now need to wait and see is, have they learnt their lessons from transfer windows gone by? Have they recognised that actually, we've gone out, we've got a player that we actually needed, that was actually of some quality in Balotelli, and lo and behold, he's actually performing. So maybe they can identify finally what the problem areas are with the squad. I still think they need to add to that defence. Certainly, they need to be looking at bringing in a new goalkeeper, and I think Sunday night really, really hammered that home. That Mandanda is not the player he once was. And funnily enough, speaking to Mo, he was saying he felt that they should never have bought him back. He was he got such a borderline legendary status for all the great performances he put in for the club prior to his departure to Crystal Palace. He felt it's ruined. He's not the player he was, and It's been over 12 months now with his form having dropped off. So he needs to be replaced. I think a few extra bodies in midfield. But the signs are there. I think that there are signs that they have turned a corner, that maybe they look like they're actually going in the right direction. But, and it's a very big but, and it's a very big caveat on this, I feel as though we've been here before. So as excited as Marseille fans could possibly think in terms of this is a step in the right direction, I think that will be tempered with a great deal of sort of deja vu of, we've been here, we felt, oh yeah, we're on the cusp, and then, we go and have a transfer window where we sign, Kevin Strootman, Gregory Sertic and Kostas Mitroglou, and it's not quite as it feels a bit of a letdown. So the big test, I think, for Marseille comes where they finish this season. If they don't finish top 3, they lose Thauvin. Whether that's a big blow or not, many will argue. And then what happens in the transfer window? If they've learnt from January, then I think next season, they could be pushing for, nailing that second spot, because the bare bones, I think, look about there with Marseille. It just now needs sort of dressing up a little bit, a bit of fine tuning, and some sensible, sound recruitment.
Yeah, and if they're not already, Marseille, start planning now, really. Get something together so you can get your business done nice and early, because for one thing, I suppose a position we didn't necessarily expect Marseille to do, although he has sort of downturned, Jez, and Richard's touched on it a bit, is Steve Mandanda. Ever since he's returned from Crystal Palace, there was a lot of fanfare, but maybe because of past glories, it's been sort of scanned over, I suppose, that he has been pretty poor at moments, but in a big game like this, it was really, really highlighted in the 2 mistakes he did. One that almost caused a horrific own goal, and the second being an outrageous decision to come out and try and save in that scenario. It's been a strange decline for him, because before he left these shores for England and pastures new, he was still one of the best keepers in Liga, if not top 3. That spell in London seems to have drastically hit him, and he's now hit that proverbial wall.
Yeah, it's interesting you say this type of game, because this was a kind of typical Marseille game, in that having been in reasonable form and looked like they were better, suddenly against a big team they did absolutely nothing. And again, Thauvin is probably not necessarily the biggest culprit, but considering that he's the one that usually performs well in the other matches, it's kind of more highlighted when he goes entirely missing. But in these type of games, that's when you expect your best players or your most experienced players to step up. And Mandanda, not only did he not step up, but he sort of did quite the opposite. And I interviewed Bruno Malville for the GFFN site last week, and he, I think, spoke for a lot of Marseille fans when, well, as Rich said, at least one of them, because Mo agrees with him, that Mandanda, and he also said Payet, should never have come back. He spoke of them both being on the wrong side of 30, no one else being interested in them, and the fact that they were coming back basically in sort of pre-retirement, and Mandanda's performances have borne that out. And I'm not sure what it was that happened at Palace. I mean, maybe playing under Sam Allardyce is enough to affect anyone that way, but and he did have injuries as well, to be fair, but it seems to be, as much as anything, a confidence thing, and then that has affected it's been kind of vicious circle, that due to a lack of confidence, his performances have been bad, and then bad performances have affected his confidence all the more. But even by his standards, which have not been great since he's come back, Sunday night was really poor. And yeah, unfortunately, because he is a club legend, I think it's definitely time for him to move. And they often say that you should never go back to the place where you were a legend the first time around. And arguably for Payet, for the first few months, it looked like he kind of was disproving that. I think even he now stuck on the bench is possibly showing that was a big mistake after all. But sadly, Mandanda has never really at any point looked like justifying the decision for Marseille to bring him back. It does feel like almost match by match he's he's kind of tarnishing the reputation that he had before Palace.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the important thing, I think, for when they did sign him is it's a difficult thing because you risk tarnishing some kind of legacy. Although I think arguing that Dimitri Payet over 2 years or 2 or 3 years can gain a legacy is a bit more questionable than Mandonda's. But they were statements, weren't they? They were the question, quote unquote, Marseille are back kind of signings, really. And the difficult thing now, as you've really mentioned, is moving them both on and to pastures new and getting their contracts off the books will be really the difficult things that it's going to puzzle them in the summer, at least anyway, should they try and do that. And hopefully they can think about trying to grow as a club again from there.
I think just as Rich said, there really is the makings of a good team there, and they just need to ensure that they keep those players and build something around them. And I just think they've taken almost like the sort of AC Milan route when things started going downhill for them, which was build the team around a load of, in football terms, perhaps the old age pensioners. And I think the Marseille fans would forgive some dodgy results if it looks like they're moving towards something. If there's some young players who look like they care, who are trying their hardest. And too often it hasn't looked like that, and so I think that's why the fans are a little bit more unforgiving. I don't think it would take that much to turn it around. As Rich said, 2 or 3 really canny signings and just showing that they're putting faith in the Caleta Sars and the Camaras and the Lopez's. And I think that the fans will show a lot more forgiveness than they have the last year or two.
Yeah, I think for anyone in Liga, maybe other than PSG, it's going to be a really, really interesting summer again to see what Marseille decide to do.
I think it should be an interesting summer for PSG as well. I just don't think it will be.
Yeah, that one's more of a wait and see at least. Well, I suppose it really is for both of them, really, to see if they can both just sort of improve and maybe have another barnstorming Le Classique next season. We'll have to wait for though. But on to things at the bottom of the table, because there was 2 big games, especially the one between Guingamp and Dijon, because it was a huge 3 points for Guingamp. Dijon had their chances. They gave away a bit of a silly penalty, really, in the end, and Ludovic Blas took it away. A great win for Guingamp because that puts them a little bit further. They're still in the relegation playoff zone, and a lot of teams above them ended up winning, which will just about annoy them. Obviously, Monaco got their victory that's pushed them a little bit further. Amiens got a point as well, so they're really 7 points away from any kind of real safety, Rich. But regardless of that, the important thing was the 3 points in a vital game like that on Saturday to give them a chance of at least not going down automatically. Especially with the games coming up. I mean, they have the cup final when they return off the international break. Montpellier and Monaco after that, which is not going to be easy. Got Marseille and Nice as well. They've at least got Caen, Nîmes and Amiens in the final 3 in 3 of the final 4 games of the season. So they do still have a chance, but it was absolutely vital for them to get a victory here, wasn't it?
It was. I mean, we touched on this game in a little bit of detail on the preview show. And I said on that I felt whoever came out of that game without the 3 points would almost certainly, I think, be facing the drop. And so I think, as we also touched upon, I think we both, I think, thought that Dijon would come out of this as the losers, and it's proven to be the case. I think for Guingamp, you look, and yes, they have some tricky games, but they've won 2 in 4 now. It doesn't take a lot at this stage to get confidence back. I think Gourvenec he knows how to do this. He knows how to rouse the troops. He knows how to have a bit of a dogfight. He knows how to get the best from an underdog team. And maybe it's taken a little bit of time following his return, but the club wasn't in a good place. Under Kombouaré, it wasn't really going in the right direction, but he now seems to have found it. And I think what is equally as impressive is, of course, previous week they suffered a really damaging loss to Toulouse. It would have been easy, I think, for that to have completely knocked them, but it didn't. They galvanized. They put in a solid. I'm not going to say it was a hugely impressive performance, because It perhaps wasn't quite that, but they galvanised and fought hard, and ultimately they got the 3 points. And it is a huge 3 points. It really, really is. You know, they know how it feels to win now. You know, they followed that up with you know, they beat Angers a few weeks ago. They've been picking up points. I think that's the key difference between their Guingamp and Dijon and Caen is they've just been consistently losing. Guingamp in the last few weeks have started to pick up points, and they've now been rewarded, of course, with that huge win at the weekend that's taken them to 18th. And momentum feels with them now. You know, they know they've got that winning feeling. They've got that positivity now in the squad. They feel as though they're going in the right direction. They've moved up the table. You know, all of that plays a part into really, really boosting the morale. And you just think everything that we've just said there for Guingamp, the complete opposite is the case for Dijon. You know, ironically, they've got the former Guingamp coach in Comboire in the dugout. He's not stopped the rot. Again, I think it was, you know, actually on the preview show mentioned what a crazy decision it was to have sacked a manager who knows how to get the best from these players. And, you know, that's proving to be the case because Comboire has seen no response whatsoever from the squad. You know, they're still leaking goals as they always seem to have done, but they're not scoring. They're just not scoring goals. It's 2 goals in about 8 games, I think, now for Dijon. With, you know, tricky games. You know, they themselves have tricky games. You know, and they're away at Lyon. You know, they've got to face. You know, they're away at PSG. The only saving grace I think that Dijon have to cling to is they have a double header. Sorry, they don't have a double header. That's Caen that has a double header. But they play away at Caen, and they have games that, you know, if they're to stay up, should be deemed as winnable. You know, they're at home to Amiens. They finish at home to Toulouse. They're at home to Strasbourg, who by then might not have much to play for. So it's not over yet, but I certainly feel as though these 3 teams will make up the bottom 3. I don't see them winning enough points to close that. I think it's 7-point gap to 17th. So I think it will be a battle between these 3 teams. But you look at form, and form is what ultimately matters at the moment. And that is, you know, Caen and Dijon are a million miles away from getting any kind of form that will give them hope for survival. Whereas, you know, the opposite now is the case for Guingamp.
Yeah, and Richard's hit the nail on the head really there with Jez with Dijon. I mean, they've scored twice in their last 8 games, and they've got 1 point from those games as well, which was against RAS. But admittedly, they have got games where they've got chances. Rich highlighted a few. I think I'd also highlight the away game against Nantes, who are stuck in neutral really more than anything at the moment, and a Nice side that seems to be gifting teams below them chances to get points. But it's all starting to look a little bit desperate for them now, given the gap they've got to do. It's almost like a shoot fight between them and Guingamp, and they've gifted the Brittany side the advantage in this one there.
Yeah, I think although it's close between those 3, and I agree, I think it is just between those 3 now, and obviously that 18th place and the fact that it's a playoff is I guess great for us because it gives, you know, makes it a little bit more exciting, and it's kind of great for those teams because it gives one of them a second chance. So there really is still something to fight for. But yeah, on paper, Dijon have a few winnable matches there. You know, arguably all their home matches are winnable, possibly except for Rennes, which looks tough. But there is room for them to get points there. The problem is that, as Rich said, although confidence can turn quickly, it's also a very fragile thing. And it's been so long since they've won any. Well, they haven't won any match since beginning of February, and that was in the cup. They haven't won a league match since the end of the last week of January, and that is a hell of a long sort of winless run to turn around. And as you said, the problem is it's not even sort of, a lot of the time it's not particularly valiant defeats, because they don't look like scoring. And it's bizarre because if you just looked probably at the three teams on paper, irrespective of form, you just looked at the names on the squad, you'd think, well, if nothing else, Dijon they've got goals in them. They're going to concede, but they're going to score enough goals to scrape through. But the players they've got, the Janos, the Tavares, the players that you'd expect to be just coming up with a few goals, they're not getting. And, even the fact that Tavares was sort of officially not because of any sort of discipline thing, but just because of, I think, lack of form. The fact that he was kind of publicly officially stripped of his captaincy last week is another sort of, I think, poor sign, poor outward show. And on the other side of it, there's Guingamp, who, although they're not exactly flush with wins, you can see that they've sort of been building something. And they've conceded one goal in their last 5 matches. That's even though they only got 2 wins, the fact that they're becoming a lot stingier at the back is huge, because it means that they don't need to score as many to get the points. Secondly, they can hopefully, the confidence they're building by keeping those clean sheets, they're coming out thinking, at the very least, we're not going to lose, or someone's going to have to work really hard and play really well to beat us. And then it's up to us to do the business at the other end, and hopefully we'll get the points. And yeah, certainly at the moment, they're the ones that have built up. It's not a huge head of steam, but it is a head of steam, whereas Caen haven't won all year. Dijon haven't won in the league since January. I'm sure there's still going to be a couple of surprises, and things aren't going to be straightforward. But at the moment, it's not even close. Guingamp are the only one showing any kind of form.
And coming on to perfectly set up the thing for Caen, really, because I was going to say that they've not won since week 18 back in December. They've been pretty dreadful, really, which is maybe the only way of expressing it. And it sort of capitalised, you could say, with this result of the weekend, because Saint-Etienne haven't been in the greatest of form. In their last 7 games, they've only won, well, in their last 6 games prior to this game, they'd only won twice, once against Dijon by a goal, and against Strasbourg by a result of 2-1. So they haven't been winning strongly when they have, and they've been pretty uncomfortable in the games. But they gave Caen an absolute shellacking. It's maybe the only way, really, of saying it at the weekend. 5-0. Caen only managed 1 shot on target, and that came in the 64th minute. So it took forever for them to even muster a chance at home as well. That's about as bleak as it can get.
It is. I mean, I have quite a murky theory about this, is that kind of identified their games now that they have left. And that performance to me screamed of, you know what, we're not going to win this. Let's not risk any injuries. Let's not risk any burnout. And, it almost felt like they've just thrown the match. It just felt as though, right, well, we're not putting any eggs in this particular basket, because, we know in a couple of games' time, we're away at Nîmes. That's a winnable game. We follow that up at home to Angers. That's a winnable game. They're away at Nice. Then they have, alluded to it earlier, then they have the double header at home to Dijon, away at Guingamp. So there's winnable games there. Saint-Etienne at home, maybe they just thought, you know what, we're just not gonna, almost like they're not going to turn up. Now, it's not a great attitude to have. We don't want to see that kind of attitude. And that's only a theory, of course, but it was an absolutely abject performance. It really was. It was a performance that screamed the players have just given up. The players don't think they've got it in them to stay up. They don't feel as though the coach has got it in him to turn things around. And it just feels as though they're just going to miserably, slowly, in arguably the worst way possible, just drop out of the league by playing. I mean, it's not even as though they're being unlucky. They're victims of poor luck or bad luck. They're playing some really horrible stuff. They're struggling for goals. They're conceding goals left, right, and centre. There is a huge lack of quality in that squad. You felt as though they were going to have a troublesome season ever since Patrice Caron left, who'd obviously done wonders, really, I think, with the squad to keep them in the top flight for as long as he did. And maybe he saw what was coming and decided, you know what, now's a pretty good time to leave, because this squad is not a good squad. I genuinely don't see how Caen turn this around. I really don't think they have it in them, and they've never been particularly high scorers anyway. So I don't really know where the goals are going to come from. At least you have you could make an argument for Dijon that they have strikers who have proven goal scoring ability. They did it very successfully last season, and maybe all it will take is a couple of a goal or a lucky deflection here or there, and all of a sudden for those kind of players the feeling of scoring and the knack of goal scoring returns. But I don't get that from Caen. The quality in that squad just doesn't feel good enough, and they're bottom of the table now. I don't see them moving from that position now for the rest of the season.
Yeah, I think Rich has nailed that, really, because it looks like they're really focusing on that double header really now, because yes, they've got winnable games, but they're in such dreadful form, and the teams they are facing where you think Nîmes can be really high goal scorers, can Caen really match them out? We haven't seen that in any shape or form this season, really. That I can't even remember the last time they scored more than one goal in a game. It must be a long time ago. I mean, they got 6 in the Coupe de France, but I'm not going to count that, really. They got 2 against France in the draw. That was the last time. So it has been since the new year for that as well. A game against Angers is not going to be easy given the form they've shown recently. Nice away is such a tough one because they do concede such few goals where they can break that defence. So those 2 games, I think they've settled on the fact that they'll be in that bottom 3. But those last 2 games, really, Jez against Dijon and Guingamp, late April, early May, will decide whether they go down automatically or whether they simply just about get that relegation playoff place.
Yeah, it could come down to that, but it's playing a very dangerous game, hoping that Dijon and Guingamp don't get enough points elsewhere, that just getting 6 points from those 2 games, which is obviously far from a formality anyway, that would even be enough for them to get that 18th place. They're just showing absolutely no form, and as you both alluded to, whereas Dijon's strikers, I think, do have an element of quality, I'm not really sure that Caen have enough anyway. That they're all sort of more or less kind of journeymen Ligue 1 strikers who'll come up with a handful of goals maybe in a good season, but not the type that you'd really want to be relying on them. I think Ninka's showing a little bit of a return to form, but I don't think it's enough by himself. They've got a couple of creative players in midfield, but they see either they're not doing enough themselves or they haven't formed a good enough relationship with the strikers. And it's even harder to see how they're going to turn it around than Dijon, because, yeah, as I said, I think Dijon, you can point to a few quality players in that team that you think if they can raise their game by a few percent, they could get the results. But I just don't think there's anywhere near that kind of quality in Caen's team. And whereas the last couple of seasons they've scraped through with Garon behind them. It sounds wrong to say it, but with a couple of very dodgy looking results against PSG in both seasons as well to help them out. I can't see that happening this year. And Courbis came in to help Mercadal, and I'll hopefully give him that bit of experience that will help him and the team out. I don't know if it's that now it kind of undermines Mercadal, and so he's got even less authority in the changing room, or just that Courbis is quite a veteran coach now. Maybe he's just lost it and doesn't quite have the sort of spark that he used to have to get players really playing for him. But whatever it is, it hasn't made any difference. You look at the results over the last month or so, and it's really difficult to see how they're going to get out of this.
Yeah, it becomes tougher and tougher by the week, and like you said there, Jez, it's such a tough game to play. They could already be pretty much down or really struggling before that double header even comes across, and I think that's probably going to be the case, really. And, I can't even see them catching anyone. The teams would love if they could just have dragged someone into the dogfight with them, but everyone just keeps nicking a couple of points to stay afloat. I'm thinking Toulouse grabbing a few. Marseille got a big win, but Monaco got a big win, and I don't think anyone would have ever thought they would have been dragged back down. But at the same time, Amiens still got a point at the weekend when they had a penalty against them in the last minute that might have helped teams give some encouragement. Same with the free fall. Nantes have been in the second half of the season. At another time, they might have been able to drag them in, but they're so far behind them already. It's just becoming more and more difficult, really. And those three are going to have a dogfight to the end of the season now. But on to matters that will happen this week, really. The France squad was announced what feels like an age ago, really more than that. But the qualifiers don't happen until Friday and later on, at the start of next week, when the squad was an interesting one for Didier Deschamps. Rich, a lot of people argued that there was plenty of people queuing up to get a call-up, really, given the form that they've been in. But he stuck with his guns and a lot of sort of continuity over the team that he had previously in the Nations League. Do you think that was the right decision to go for that continuity over and trust in those players rather than the competition that a lot of players really recently have put forward over the course of the season?
I get it. You know, I am a huge Deschamps fan. That goes without saying. But as I tweeted at the time of the squad announcement, he does have this knack of making it really tough at times because, you know, by and large, I have no issue with the squad, but there are players within there. I scratch my head and think there's loyalty and then there's something else because, you know, I don't know why or how Mandanda is there for starters. Let's start with the goalkeepers. I don't know why Mandanda is there. You know, you've got Hugo Lloris, captain, nailed on starter, no question of that. The excuse that everybody keeps giving is Mandanda is there for experience. Maybe I can understand that for a tournament, but not for a round of qualification, not for two games. No, I don't buy that. Areola is more than capable as a backup. You know, you've got keepers like Benjamin Lecomte, for example, who are performing incredibly well week in, week out. You've got, you know, dare I say it, Benoit Costil, who I think has had a very good season with Bordeaux. You know, you've got Alban Lafont. Let's not forget about him. He is knocking at the door, and I know there is almost a requirement. It feels, unless you're something truly exceptional, that you sort of do your hours, if you like. You do your badges, if you like, with the youth teams. But by all accounts, he's having a really strong season in Italy with Fiorentina. So I don't know why Mandanda is there. We look at the defence. Okay, I get it that injury has ruled out the sort of maybe the first three choices in Hernandez and the two Mendy's, but I really don't know how Layvin Kurzawa, who has only just returned from a long-term injury, and even that hasn't guaranteed him a starting role in the PSG team, quite how he's been called up. That feels very much like a default call-up of, actually, you know what, we don't have too many other options here, because I'm fairly confident that Luca Dean, who has had a good season with Everton, will no doubt start both of those matches. You know, Kimpembe, I don't think has had a particularly good season. You know, he's not had a good couple of games when he's played for France recently. But, you know, Deschamps has continued to reward him there. You know, Umtiti has only just himself come back from injury. Zuma, is he really, you know, the player that should be called up when you've got players like Issa Diop, for example, who's playing really well for West Ham? There's obviously, you know, the sort of elephant in the room, if you like, is Aymeric Laporte. And will it ever happen? I know he himself has just come back from a knock as well. So that defence probably is the source of most questions. I don't think there's particularly too many issues in the midfield. And then up front, I suppose, is another area where questions have to be asked. Martial was unlucky to have to drop out of this squad. I think he had to do it in the last international break as well, where he played really well for United and then got called up, but only had to withdraw for them for injury. Thomas Lemar, a slight curious call. We know he's a good player, but I'm not sure he's necessarily been at his best for Atletico. Thauvin, really curious because you can't necessarily knock his form to a huge degree at club level. Never really seems to be given the chances at international level, and when he doesn't really feels like he takes them. So you have to question, is it worth having him in the squad if you're going to not play him? And when he does have the tiniest of opportunities, it's not great. And I suppose in terms of the attack, the elephant in the room there, of course, is Lacazette. He's in good form for Arsenal. He has been, in good form, it feels like, for the last, 6-7 seasons. And you just feel he's got to be rewarded at some point. I know he's had opportunities and, opportunities he has taken, opportunity he hasn't with France. But you just feel we can't continue. Deschamps can't continue to ignore these players who are quite clearly, at the top of their game. I don't think many would argue that Laporte, for example, has been arguably one of, if not the best, centre-back in the Premier League this season. Maybe
blasphemy.
maybe Jers will have a few Brighton-based players.
What about the greatest player in the world? Apparently, Van Dijk.
Oh, well,
best Dutch player in the Premier League ever, isn't he?
Apparently,
but there's question marks. I suppose there is. I don't mind Deschamps having that loyalty. I really don't. And to be perfectly honest, I'm of the opinion he could probably do whatever the hell he wants because he's won the World Cup. But I very much am for. I want to see Laporte in this team now. I want to see Lacazette in this team. I want loyalty, yes, but I also want players to feel as though if they're playing well, they will get rewarded with a call up and given an opportunity in that squad. We know it we know it can happen. Mbappe is obviously an extreme example, but that's happened. And Ndombele, perhaps a more recent example. We know that's happened. You look at it wasn't that long ago that Lucas Hernandez was nowhere near the squad, and he went in. He went into the World Cup then and was the first choice left back. We know Ferland Mendy would have been in this squad, but for injury. So we know that Deschamps can. So there's something with Laporte and Lacazette that is perhaps yet to be uncovered. But I do want to see them in. I want to see players at the top of their game playing at world-class levels. I would arguably claim, especially with Laporte, be rewarded with a call up to the French squad. I think it's only the right thing to do. But of course, Deschamps is a big proponent of loyalty, big proponent of harmonious squads. So, maybe we read into that there's concerns that he has over their ability to slot into a harmonious squad.
Jess, I think the important fact is that there's a lot of names that really could be argued. It's a benefit to have it really at France level that they've got so many names that many feel aggrieved to be out. But who do you think was the biggest snub out of the lot of them? I mean, there's a lot of questionable calls of players that have been out of form or recently injured or barely playing for club sides even. But who do you think has the most egregious reason to say that they really should be absolutely in this squad?
I'm tempted to say any French goalkeeper that isn't Mandanda, but I think for me it's Lacazette. Laporte, as Rich said, he's coming back from a knock, and there are enough rumours swirling around about him that possibly there are maybe legitimate concerns about sort of squad harmony there. I'm not sure how many, if any, are true, but there's an element of sort of no smoke without fire. Lacazette, I know Deschamps had an issue with him before, but that was from a tour that was 5 years ago. Since then, he's matured a lot. he's been called into the squad before. I can only really think of one squad get together where he's really impressed over 2 matches. But the fact is that he's doing it every week at a top level, and I think he can bring the. Deschamps talks a lot about the profiles up front, and it's when people are saying, why have you picked him and not him? Why have you picked Giroud and not Ben Yedder, for example? They're completely different players, but I don't think that argument holds as much weight with Lacazette, because I really think he can do a bit of everything. I think he can play off the wings, he can play down the middle, he can drop, he can create, he can finish. I think he can do it all. And I personally would think he'd be a big addition to the squad. To be honest, on form, it's not even necessarily in replacement of Giroud. I think I'd have him in place of Fekir, who I'm not sure is doing it consistently enough at the moment necessarily to warrant a place in the squad, even though he's proved that he can be a sort of big game player. Although he didn't show that at all last week. So yeah, for a lot of the other positions, I think you can argue the toss either way. Thauvin, for example, it's really hard to drop him because of his form, but his club form. But would you ever be confident if you had to play him at national level when he's done absolutely nothing, albeit with very little chances? Other positions, as Rich said, I think left back is just because there's no one else. Right back, I think that although he'd be a complete newcomer, Lala deserves it all day long more than Sidibe does at the moment. So that there are a few others that could feel hard done by, but for me, Lacazette is the standout strange one.
Yeah, I think for one thing, Laporte might as well sign up for a Spanish passport. I think more than anything, I don't think he's ever going to really get in at this point. But
the interesting one is that a lot of people are saying that Lenglet deserves a place, and that could be a really interesting one to look at, because obviously him and Umtiti are vying for the left-sided centre-back position for club and possibly country in the future.
Absolutely. I think I'm going to throw one in here that we've not mentioned. I mentioned on Twitter really before the announcement, because I can't understand what more Sebastian Haller has to do this season to get a call up. Really, I've watched him a few times for Frankfurt, and a lot of Bundesliga fans will say that yes, Luka Vujovic is an absolute sensation for them, but Sebastian Haller is the glue that puts them together. He's terrific on the ball. He sets up his teammates. He's skillful. He's a great striker. He's so strong as well. He's a Giroud 2.0, and the fact that I know there's a loyalty to Giroud and what he has done for France and bits like that, but the simple fact of the matter is, and he's even admitted it himself, he's a Europa League player now, unfortunately, because that's all Chelsea want to use him for. Now, at the moment, the rumour is that the Deschamps obviously wants to move on to a sort of Kylian Mbappe moving as a central striker and using some of the very attacking wingers they've got. And if that's the case, then why take Giroud in the first place then again to reward him for not playing and scoring goals in the 3 appearances he gets every so now and again? If he wants to insist on using Giroud, I can't believe that he's, out of all the strikers he's got, yes, Lacazette's got a good case, I think Ben Yedder has, but I think out of anyone, in terms of what he would offer in terms of it, not just goal scoring, but from a target man and a creative sense as well. He's got double figure assists so far this season in the Bundesliga as well. He just would be an excellent link, and if he insists on playing Giroud and not bringing Haller into the squad, who's going to get a lot of eyes looking at him in the summer, I think he's a sensational footballer. It's a real shame to think that he's going to have to wait a little bit longer, especially because they are playing these friendlies in midweek, Rich, because the first one is against Moldova, which, well, pretty much, I don't really want to offend the Moldovans really, but it is expected to be a kind of walkover. I'm sure they would be happy even if they only lose by a couple of goals really. And then a game against Iceland, which is seen as somewhat of a bogey team, but they have been a little bit poorer over the last 12 months really than what we'd expected last time, sort of over the Euros and such. Is that maybe the I suppose that's the shame that Deschamps has shown that he's not going to try and experiment in these sort of, what you may say is, at least the first one is a more lackluster game, but focusing on the matches themselves at least. 6 points realistically, or at least this Iceland one is gonna cause some kind of problem?
I mean, it should be 6 points. Of course, it should be 6 points. But this is France in a qualifying campaign for a major tournament, and things certainly in recent qualification rounds have never been the most straightforward. There have been the odd twist or turn. It wasn't that long ago that they were drawing with Luxembourg. So yes, it should be 6 points. I think the squad that Deschamps has picked, and perhaps the lack of experimentation, maybe is a sign that he is taking this very seriously, and he is keen to make sure that the squad gets off to a good start to the qualifying in terms of picking up those 6 points. Funnily enough, I think the Iceland game at home, I think, could actually turn out to be the easier of the two. Away to all the sort of Eastern European teams is always a little tricky. It's the opening qualifying game. Maybe they may just be a little bit rusty. I've still maintained that they will pick up the 6 points, but chances are we're not going to see a vintage French performance. Certainly, in at least one of the games, I think it may be a little bit of a slog.
Jess, do you agree with that statement? That I suppose the worry for France over the last sort of year or so is that they sometimes play down to opponents on occasion, and expected wins against Moldova, while it might not be as much of a concern against Moldova, against an Iceland team that can be really plucky despite their sort of dip in form, shall we say, on the international scale over the last sort of 6 to 12 months. Didn't get a single point during the Nations League against Switzerland and Belgium, which aren't the easy sides in the world, but we might have hoped for a little bit more, given how they'd been in previously, and the World Cup wasn't really a shining moment for them, despite getting a nice point against Argentina as well. But in a sense, that this should really be 6 points and a good start to what really looks like a comfortable group.
I 100% agree with what Rich said. I think it should be 6 points, but definitely it's the away match in Moldova, which is the one that I think will be the struggle. France have struggled with those kind of matches before, against Belarus more than once. I remember a few years ago, a couple against Lithuania, for example, as well. So there's sort of history there. And in a way, it's nice that I remember sort of 15, 20 years ago when France were known as the world champions of friendlies and qualifiers, because they had quite good records in that, and then sort of flop in the tournaments or in matches that really mattered. So the sort of comfort is that struggling in qualifying tournaments and then winning World Cups, and I'll definitely take it that way around all day long. But yeah, I'm not expecting much pretty football in the Moldova match. Hopefully against Iceland, we can see something a little bit more expansive. Hopefully Iceland will show sort of more intent on their side, which will allow France to do that as well. But yeah, the Moldova one, I don't really care how it happens. I just think the most important thing is the 3 points, and kind of connected with that and with the Haller thing. That to me, that's the frustration. I know lots of people say, "Oh God, it's another international meetup and bloody friendlies and all that." I really do think friendlies are important, and as good as the Nations League has been in some ways, the fact that it is still a kind of semi-competitive competition, if that makes sense, I think means that there's less opportunity for managers to try to blood new players. And I think that's the thing with Haller here. Yes, he deserves a call up, maybe Dembele as well, for example. But the fact is, the most important thing is getting 3 points in Moldova. And possibly Deschamps' thinking in terms of the big striker up front. Giroud's the fourth highest goal scorer in France's history. I know I can rely on him to get the goals. Haller, if I was to play him on his debut, possibly a bit nervous, possibly at a different level, maybe not Moldova, but the players around him, for example, less affinities with them, it's much more of a risk. So if this had been a meet up with 2 friendlies, I'd have been a lot more frustrated of not seeing a Haller or a Dembele or even a Ben Yedder again. But I do understand Deschamps' thinking with 2 qualifiers coming up.
In fairness to Alera, I'm not sure if he knows anything in terms of nerves from the looks of how he comes onto a football field. To 19 goals and 12 assists in 37 games. That's through Bundesliga, all the cups, and the Europa League as well, where they're having a fantastic time of things. He's really playing spectacular football at the moment. It would have been nice. But on to our final bit this evening, at least anyway, and it's our Liga snapshots, my favourite moment at least. Let's start with yourself on this one, Rich. What's your Liga snapshot?
Mine's really, really brief this week. It was a really nice stat in scoring I suppose you'd call it a trademark towering header for him now off the bench. 36-year-old Montpellier striker Suleiman Kamara became the first player this century to score in 15 different Ligue 1 seasons, which I think is a pretty remarkable feat. But he's been the archetypal journeyman, but a fantastic servant to the top flight. So it was nice to see him back on the score sheet again.
Jess?
I've picked one from the same match, and we spent a long time talking about Mandanda, and Lecomte was mentioned in dispatches. I love Lecomte. I think he's a fantastic keeper, and if Montpellier miss out on Europe, I think he'll be very in demand, and a move to Marseille is the very obvious one. But a couple of times recently, he's made a couple of strange errors, and I thought 2 of Lyon's goals arguably were his fault at the weekend. So I'm really hoping that's not a sign of things to come, and that it's not going to scupper his chances of a big move, because I think he's deserved for a very long time the chance to move to a really top club, the chance to get more exposure to the France squad, and I hope this isn't a case of sort of I don't know, nerves just as that big move is in the offing.
Absolutely. I think mine, again, I suppose this season, it seems like I always pick this team on my Liga snapshot. It is Reims again, but another excellent performance from them. Another great performance from Zanelli, who's been terrific since he's joined them from Herenveen. But I wanted to particularly highlight Remy Udan's goal, because it's an absolutely brilliant strike from the forward, who's in red hot form really for the club that can't seem to think about losing at the moment. They've been on a tear in 2019. They're in a great position heading into this last sort of international break, sitting in 6th, only a point off Marseille in 4th, which should really stoke the fires of them, and some interesting games heading up for them, because obviously they won't be playing on the weekend straight away after the international break. They have to play Strasbourg in midweek due to their cup fixture. So they have a little bit of an extra added rest before they get back to the stage. They then have a difficult game against Lille and then Monaco as well. But Saint-Etienne, Angers, Nîmes, Caen, Bordeaux, before facing Paris Saint-Germain on the last day of the season, who may have already won the title. There's a real argument that Reims, if they can continue the form they've showed in 2019, they really could finish in 4th, which would be a spectacular achievement. But hats off to them, but especially to that beautiful Remy Udan goal. Do go and check it out. It'll be on the YouTube on the Liga and YouTube for Liga, and at least anyway, check it out. It's a terrific strike.
And just very, very quickly, just with Reims as well, just to follow up on that, is the fact that with 13 games without defeat, only Barcelona are on a longer unbeaten run in the top 5 European leagues than
Could
Reims.
you imagine? That's true champagne football, isn't it? And I think that's a perfect place to end that, really. That's all that we have time for. My thanks to Rich, Jez, and all of you listening at home. With the international break, there'll be no show tomorrow for the preview show, but do join us back on the main show again on Monday. A bientôt, and goodbye.